Welcome to this rapid revision session on the Norman legal system. The Norman legal system was somewhat different from the Anglo-Saxon one, but actually it carried over a lot of the strongest ideas from the already strong Anglo-Saxon legal code. Anglo-Saxon England was well governed by the standards of the 11th century. William wanted continuity because complete change might cause him more problems than it solved. However, he still wanted to maintain and keep his power, or even to extend it in certain ways. There were two main changes to the legal system under the Normans. Firstly, we need to understand that the power of the king increased under William. Secondly, we need to understand that the church also increased in its power because it was an important part of the legal system that most people were prepared to accept. And after all, it is very difficult to maintain a legal system if people don't expect and indeed accept the justice that it provided, as far as anyone could get justice in the Middle Ages. So let's have a look at the change and continuity of this legal system. The scales of justice. Here they are. On the one side, we have change after 1066. This is where things didn't stay the same and William introduced new ideas or modified some old ones. On the other hand, we have continuity from before 1066. This is where William was bringing in new ideas that were not his own and just carrying things over from the Anglo-Saxon period. So let's have a look at some examples. One example of continuity was that William kept the majority of Saxon laws. But on the other hand, there was change too. In some areas, there were attacks on individual Norman soldiers. William made a new law that if a Norman was murdered, all of the people in that region had to join together and pay a high fine called the murdrum fine. This was supposed to act as a deterrent against Anglo-Saxons murdering their new Norman overlords, which I'm sure must have been tempting at times. The Normans also kept the systems of tithings and the hue and cry because they were effective ways of policing local communities. Remember, the hue and cry was where there was a legal responsibility in a community to raise the alarm until a criminal was apprehended. But an example of change would be that William used the death penalty for serious crimes and for re-offenders. Executions were carried out in public to show the power of the king. Executions had been rare before 1066 when fines had been paid by the offender to the victim. Remember things like the weregild. The Normans kept their religious ritual of trial by ordeal though, but they also introduced trial by combat. The accused fought the accuser until one was killed or unable to fight on. The loser was then hanged, assuming they were still alive, as God had judged them to be guilty. So just like trial by ordeal, whereby God would give their judgment by deciding whether or not to heal someone's wounds, in this case it was judged that God would show their approval by either helping one side to fight and win this trial by battle or trial by combat, or by making sure that the other person lost. That's the general idea though. However, we're now going to have a look at more examples of change. These are all new things that William introduced. William introduced the forest laws. Trees could no longer be cut down for fuel or building, and people in forests were forbidden to own dogs or bows and arrows. Those caught hunting deer were punished by having their first two fingers chopped off. If caught a second time, the punishment was blinding. These were very severe and unpopular laws that were introduced, and it's worth remembering that a forest does not necessarily mean a big load of trees. It was anywhere that was set aside for the king's personal use as hunting grounds, and that could indeed be farmland. Norman French became the official language used in court procedures, and all court records were kept in Latin. Most English people could not understand either language. William used fines for lesser crimes. However, he ordered that fines should no longer be paid to the victim or their family, but to the king's officials. Also, the Normans introduced church courts. These were separate courts used for churchmen and tended to be more lenient. After all, they were judging members of their own. Some final points then. William recognised the strengths of the Anglo-Saxon legal code and kept many of its laws and customs in place. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, he introduced fines like the murdrum and increased the number of executions to keep the population under control. After all, the Normans themselves were heavily outnumbered by the Saxons. He increased the power of the king by introducing forest laws and fines that were paid directly to the crown rather than to the victim. And he increased the influence of the church with separate church courts to judge the clergy. These are often more lenient. Anyway, that's the end of this brief rapid revision session. I hope that it's been useful to you, and if it has, please give this video a like and subscribe for more of the same. If you've got a topic that you're desperate for me to do as a rapid revision video, pop it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.